All right, everyone, get ready for this because today we're going to dive into something called 18 Degrees of Social Freedom.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It is. It is. It's
Yeah.
from this seminar handout by a guy named Brad P. And
Okay.
let me tell you, this guy, he's all about getting you out of your comfort zone.
I like it already.
Yeah, big time. We're talking 18 exercises.
Wow.
Each one is designed to make you, well, how should we say, socially fearless.
Huh. Socially fearless. That's quite a concept.
It is.
18 exercises. That's a lot.
It is.
So what kinds of things are we talking about here?
Well, they start out pretty basic, like holding eye contact with people.
Okay, sure.
But then they kind of ramp up to things that, well, let's just say some people might consider them a little
That's
outrageous.
outrageous. Okay, you got to give me an example.
Outrageous is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, who in their right mind would think of moonwalking in a circle around complete strangers?
Oh, wow.
And that's not even the wildest one.
Really? There's more. I'm intrigued. But before we get to all that, I gotta ask, what's the point of all this? What's this Brad P guy trying to achieve with these exercises?
Well, he calls it expanding your social freedom. Basically, these exercises, they're designed to like chip away at those invisible walls we build up around ourselves.
You mean like fear of judgment and stuff like that?
Exactly. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, all those things that keep us from, really connecting with other people.
Makes sense. But I gotta say, some of these exercises sound more like, how do I put this? More like a recipe for disaster than, social liberation.
Yeah, some of them are definitely out there.
So, like, give me an example of one that you think is kind of a recipe for disaster.
Well, okay, look at exercise 12, for example. It's called butting in. Like, seriously.
Butting in. Okay, what does that even mean?
You're supposed to just walk up to a group of strangers, listen to their conversation for a bit, and then just jump right in.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah. I mean, isn't that a little, well, rude?
I was gonna say, it sounds super awkward. Like, wouldn't people just look at you like, what are you doing?
Right.
So how does that work? What's the, strategy there?
That's where things get a little tricky. It's not about, barging in and just taking over the conversation.
Okay.
It's more about challenging that ingrained social script that tells us we have to wait for an invitation to join a group.
I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah. You got to read the social cues, find like a natural opening, and then, confidently insert yourself into the dynamic.
Confidently, yeah. I can see how that would be tough.
Totally.
But I can also see how it might be helpful, to get over that fear of approaching people.
Right.
But I'm still a little skeptical. Like, I'm all for pushing boundaries, but some of these exercises just seem like they'd make me feel more awkward, not less.
I hear. And I think that's a pretty common concern. That's why Brad P stresses starting small.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
You gradually increase the intensity. You don't have to jump straight to like moonwalking in a circle around people.
Oh, thank goodness.
You start with something manageable, maybe a little uncomfortable, but not like terrifying.
So it's kind of like building up a tolerance, like a social awkwardness tolerance?
Exactly. It's like exposure therapy, but for social anxiety.
Huh.
The more you expose yourself to those potentially awkward situations, the more you realize they're not actually that bad.
Yeah, I guess the more you do it, the less scary it becomes.
Right. And the less power those fears have over you.
Makes sense. Okay, I'm starting to see the logic here. But let's be honest. Some of these exercises are just plain weird. Like, who actually needs to learn how to moonwalk in a circle around strangers? What's the practical use for that?
Right. Like, when am I ever going to need that in real life?
I know, right?
What's the point?
Well, you'd be surprised. It's not about the actual skill itself.
Okay.
It's about the principle, the underlying idea of confronting that fear of, looking silly, of being judged.
So it's more about the mindset than the actual moonwalking.
Exactly. Like, imagine walking into a big presentation at work knowing you've already moonwalked in public. Suddenly those nerves, they don't seem so bad, right?
I guess that's true. But what about people who aren't necessarily trying to be like the life of the party?
Sure.
What if they just want to feel a little more comfortable in, everyday situations?
Well, that's the beauty of the system. It's not like one size fits all. You find your own edge. The level of challenge that feels right for you. Maybe butting in for you is just starting a conversation with the barista at your coffee shop.
So it's more about the mindset than the specific actions.
Exactly. It's about, being playful, experimenting in your social interactions. It's about challenging those beliefs that tell us we have to be perfect, that we can't make mistakes.
I like that. It's about giving ourselves permission to be a little awkward, a little messy.
A little human.
Yeah.
Embrace those imperfections.
Speaking of, kind of going on this journey,
Hmm.
Brad Pitt talks a lot about tracking your progress.
Yeah,
But how do you measure something like social freedom?
that's a good question. It's not about, reaching some objective standard. It's about noticing those little changes in your own comfort levels. Like maybe you find yourself making eye contact more easily,
Okay.
or you're not as nervous when you talk to a stranger. Those small wins, they add up over time.
So it's more about those internal shifts than like, what other people think.
Yeah, exactly. It's about becoming your own, social scientist. You observe your own reactions and notice those changes in how you feel, how you behave.
I actually tried one of these exercises myself, the compliment a stranger one. I told this guy, hey, I like your hat. And he just gave me the weirdest look. Turns out it was his grandma's hat. I still cringe when I think about it.
Oh, no.
I know.
But hey, at least you put yourself out there. It's all part of the process, right?
True, true. But speaking of putting yourself out there, there's one thing I'm still struggling with. This whole idea of safe groups versus strangers. Why does he make that distinction?
That's interesting. I think it comes down to recognizing that, not everyone's ready to just dive in with total strangers.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Starting with people you already know, your safe group, that can be a good stepping stone. You can practice those skills in a less scary environment.
So it's like a dress rehearsal for the real thing.
Yeah, exactly. You try out different approaches, you get feedback from people who, are supportive. It's about building your confidence before you take it to the wider world.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful, especially for someone who's really struggling with social anxiety. But what about people who are already pretty comfortable, in social situations? What if they want to take it to the next level?
Well, even for them, there's always room to grow, right? Brad P's system, it's a way to push beyond your limits, to explore new ways of connecting, to become even more confident.
So it's not just for shy people.
Nope, not at all. It's for anyone who wants to, improve their social skills, expand their network, build stronger relationships. It's like a workout, but for your social muscles.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of workouts, I've noticed a lot of these exercises, they involve physical stuff, like,
Mhm.
the moonwalking or dancing in public. Why is that?
It's about breaking down those inhibitions, those mental barriers that stop us from truly expressing ourselves. When we move our bodies in unusual ways, we're challenging how we should behave.
So it's like a physical way of breaking free from social norms.
Exactly. It's about getting back to that childlike playfulness that we lose as we get older. Like, think about how kids move. They're so free and unself-conscious. They don't care what anyone thinks.
It's true. They just go for it. I used to dance around my living room like nobody was watching. Now I can barely bring myself to dance at a wedding.
And that's the point. Somewhere along the line, we start censoring ourselves, worrying about what other people will think. Brad P's system, it encourages us to let go of those inhibitions.
That makes sense. Okay, what about this scoring system? He assigns points to each exercise, but it's not clear what you're working towards.
Yeah.
Like, is there some social freedom nirvana we're supposed to reach?
It's not about that, about reaching some endpoint. It's about tracking your own progress.
Okay.
You see how your comfort levels change as you do the exercises, the points. They're just a way to measure those changes, to see how far you've come.
So it's more about self-awareness than competition.
Exactly. Celebrate the little victories. The first time you hold eye contact for more than a few seconds. The first time you talk to a stranger without feeling like your heart's going to explode. Those are the things to focus on.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been talking about the exercises, but I think the most important part of this is the overall philosophy.
Yeah.
It's about changing your mindset.
Yeah.
Instead of being afraid of social interaction, you see it as an opportunity to grow, to connect with people.
Absolutely. And to realize that discomfort, it's not always a bad thing.
Right.
It can be a really powerful way to grow. When we push ourselves outside of our comfort zones, we open ourselves up to so many new things.
Like they say, growth happens outside your comfort zone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Brad P., he gives us a way to navigate that uncomfortable but exciting territory.
So it's not about becoming some social butterfly, effortlessly charming everyone you meet.
No, not at all. It's about becoming more genuine, more comfortable with who you are, more open to connecting with people, authentically.
You know what? As much as I've made fun of some of the crazier exercises,
Mhm.
I gotta admit, there's something really interesting about this. It's making me think about how I approach social interaction.
That's the power of new ideas, right?
Yeah.
You challenge those assumptions, those beliefs we take for granted.
And maybe we discover we can do more than we thought possible.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up our discussion on this 18 degrees of social freedom, I want to touch on one more important thing.
Okay.
Brad P., he makes it clear that progress isn't always a straight line. Some days you'll feel confident and outgoing, and other days you'll just want to stay home in your pajamas.
So true. Like with anything you're learning, there are going to be ups and downs.
Exactly. You're going to have setbacks, but you're also going to have breakthroughs. And it's important to remember that everyone's on their own journey when it comes to social comfort.
That's a good point. What's challenging for one person might be easy for someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about comparing yourself to others or judging yourself if you don't feel like you're progressing fast enough. You just got to honor your own path and celebrate those little victories along the way. I think one of the biggest things that holds people back is the fear of rejection. We make it out to be this huge thing, but in reality, it's rarely as bad as we imagine it.
It's true. We build it up in our minds, but it's usually not a big deal.
Yeah, and rejection, it's just a part of life. Everyone experiences it at some point. But the key is how we look at it.
Yeah, how we react to it.
Exactly. Instead of seeing it as a failure, see it as a chance to learn and grow.
Like they say, every no gets you closer to a yes.
Exactly. Every time we put ourselves out there, whether it's starting a conversation, asking someone out, pitching an idea, we're building resilience, we're learning, even if things don't go our way.
And sometimes the rejection isn't even about us. Maybe the other person's having a rough day or they're just not feeling social.
That's right. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about us or our worth.
Yeah, we tend to take it personally, but often it has nothing to do with us.
Exactly. So it's about detaching from the outcome and focusing on the process, on the fact that we were brave enough to put ourselves out there in the first place.
That's such a great way to look at it. It takes the pressure off and lets us be more playful and experimental in our interactions.
And that's what Brad P's system is all about. It's about being curious, exploring, and stepping outside our comfort zones, even if it means feeling a little awkward sometimes.
Because sometimes those awkward moments lead to the best connections and the most growth.
That's right. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 18 degrees of social freedom, I want to leave you with this. What's one small step you can take today to push your boundaries and expand your social world?
Maybe it's saying hi to that neighbor you always see but never talk to. Or maybe it's signing up for that dance class you've been thinking about.
Whatever it is, remember that even the smallest actions can make a big difference, not just for you, but for the people around you.
So go out there and embrace the beauty and, yes, the awkwardness of human connection. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences with us on social media using hashtag 18 Degrees of Freedom.
Keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep diving deep. It's about recognizing that, not everyone is ready to just jump right in with strangers.
Right. It can be intimidating.
Exactly. So starting with people you already know, your safe group, that can be a really good way to dip your toes in the water.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like a practice run.
Right. You can try out different approaches, experiment a little, and you get feedback from people who are, supportive.
Yeah, people who aren't going to judge you.
Exactly. It's about building that confidence, before you take it to the wider world.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for people who are really struggling with social anxiety. I could see that being really helpful. But what about people who are already, fairly comfortable in social situations?
Yeah.
What if they want to, level up their skills?
Well, I think even for people who are already pretty socially adept, there's always room to grow.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, think about it. Brad P's system, it offers a way to push beyond those self-imposed limits, to explore new ways of connecting with people, to become even more confident and engaging.
So it's not just for, shy people or introverts.
Not at all. It's for anyone who wants to improve their social skills, expand their network, build deeper relationships.
Huh, interesting.
It's like a workout routine, but for your social muscles.
Ooh, I like that. A social workout. And speaking of workouts, I've noticed that a lot of the exercises, they involve physical actions.
Yeah.
Like the moonwalking we talked about or dancing in public. Why is that?
Well, I think it's about breaking down those inhibitions, those mental barriers that keep us from really expressing ourselves.
Oh, okay.
When we move our bodies in ways that are, unconventional, we're challenging those ingrained beliefs about how we should behave in public.
So it's like a physical manifestation of breaking free from social norms.
Yeah, exactly. It's about reconnecting with that sense of playfulness and spontaneity that we often lose as we get older.
Yeah, I guess as adults we tend to overthink things.
Yeah.
We get self-conscious.
Exactly, but think about how kids move. They're
Yes,
so free and unself-conscious, they don't care what anyone thinks.
it's true. They just go for it. I remember when I was a kid, I used to dance around my living room like nobody was watching. Now, I can barely bring myself to dance at a wedding.
And that's exactly the point. Somewhere along the way, we start to censor ourselves. We worry about what other people are going to think. But Brad P's system, it encourages us uh, to shake off those inhibitions.
Yeah, to let loose a little.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about the scoring system for a second. Brad P assigns points to each exercise, but it's not really clear what you're actually working towards. Is there like some ultimate level of social freedom you're supposed to achieve?
Well, it's not about reaching some arbitrary endpoint. It's more about tracking your own progress, noticing those small shifts in your comfort level as you work through the exercises.
So the points are just a way to kind of measure that progress.
Exactly. They're just a way to quantify those changes, to give you a sense of how far you've come.
So it's more about self-awareness than competition.
Absolutely. It's about celebrating those little victories.
Yeah.
The first time you managed to hold eye contact for more than a few seconds,
Right.
or the first time you strike up a conversation with a stranger without feeling like your heart's going to beat out of your chest.
Yeah, those are big wins. It's funny. We've been talking a lot about the exercises themselves, but I think the most valuable part of Brad P's system is the underlying philosophy.
Yeah, I agree.
It's about shifting your mindset from fearing social interaction
Yeah.
to embracing it as a chance for growth, you
Yeah.
know, and for connection.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that discomfort, it's not the enemy. It can actually be a really powerful catalyst for personal transformation.
Like when we step outside our comfort zones, we open ourselves up to new experiences, new perspectives, new possibilities.
Exactly. And Brad P's system gives us a structured and supportive way to navigate that territory, that uncomfortable but ultimately rewarding territory.
It's like they say, growth happens outside your comfort zone.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the 18 degrees of social freedom, I want to mention one more important thing.
Okay.
Brad P really emphasizes that progress isn't always linear. There are going to be days when you feel confident and outgoing, and then there will be days when you'd rather just stay home in your pajamas.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true for anything we're trying to learn or improve on.
It's like, some days you're hitting the gym, feeling great, and other days you just want to curl up on the couch.
Totally. And I think it's important to remember that, when it comes to social comfort, we're all on our own unique journey.
Right, exactly. What feels challenging for one person might be a piece of cake for someone else.
Exactly. And it's not about comparing yourself to others or, judging yourself if you don't feel like you're progressing at a certain pace. It's about honoring your own path.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about celebrating those little wins along the way. I think one of the biggest things that holds people back in social situations is that fear of rejection.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The fear of rejection.
Yeah.
It can be crippling.
It is. We build it up in our minds as this catastrophic event, but in reality, it's rarely as bad as we imagine it.
It's true. We create all these worst case scenarios in our heads.
We do, but rejection is just a part of life. We all experience it at some point. The key is how we choose to view it.
Okay, yeah, how we frame it.
Exactly. Instead of seeing it as this personal failure, we can choose to see it as a learning opportunity.
A chance to grow. It's like that saying, every no gets you closer to a yes.
Precisely. Every time we put ourselves out there, whether it's striking up a conversation, asking someone out on a date, or pitching a new idea at work, we're building resilience. We're learning valuable lessons, even if the outcome isn't what we'd hoped for.
Right, right. And sometimes that rejection, it's not even personal. Maybe the other person is having a bad day or they're just not in the mood to talk. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about us or our worthiness.
Exactly. We tend to over-personalize these interactions, but often it has nothing to do with us. It's really about detaching from the outcome and just focusing on the process.
The courage it took to put ourselves out there.
Yes,
I
exactly.
think that's a really powerful way to look at it.
Yeah,
It takes the pressure off.
it does.
It allows us to approach social interaction with a more, playful, experimental attitude.
And that's what Brad P's system ultimately encourages. Sense of curiosity, a willingness to step outside our comfort zones, even if it means feeling a little awkward or uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, because often Those moments of discomfort, they lead to the most meaningful connections
Mm,
and the most personal growth.
absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 18 degrees of social freedom, I want to leave you with this thought. What's one small step you can take today to push your own boundaries, to expand your social horizons, you know?
Maybe it's finally saying hello to that neighbor you always see at the mailbox. Or maybe it's, signing up for that dance class you've been thinking about.
Whatever it is, remember that even the smallest actions, they can create a ripple effect. Not just in our own lives, but in the lives of those around us.
So go out there, listeners, and embrace the beauty and, yes, even the awkwardness of human connection. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. Share your experiences, your thoughts with us on social media. You can use the hashtag 18 degrees of freedom.
Keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep diving